Hi, here is the first essay of our semester, the Romanticism essay. I want to read through this and just kind of talk about some of the possibilities that are open here for your assignment. So here it says, choose one of the following topics and construct an argumentative essay based on research and your own close reading of the primary text. Okay, so in other words, yes, you are going to have to do some research, literary research, and also you are going to engage with the original primary text materials in all these possible questions. So the first bullet point, pick either William Blake or William Wordsworth, our two bills, and describe how his poetry serves to bring together humanity and nature. Now, if you go back to the handout and video about Romanticism, and of course also what the text, our textbook talks about, nature is a huge issue in Romanticism. When I say issue, that makes it sound like it's a problem. It's not that it's a problem, but nature is seen in many ways as a spiritual place as well as just simply a physical place. And that we might find God or some sort of other spiritual sustenance when we go to nature. This is clearly present in both of these poets. Now, in Wordsworth's preface to Lyrical Ballads, he talks more directly about nature. Wordsworth, you might even think of as almost pantheistic in his sense of finding God in nature, almost God everywhere kind of thing. Now, you need to use at least two of the poems from the syllabus if you choose Blake. Okay, so Blake, especially, the poems are pretty short. The ones from our syllabus, from Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience, or choose just one of the poems from Wordsworth, since both of those poems are long and pretty substantial. So you need to read those poems, study them, read about them, talk about how we bring together humanity, that is, people, us, civilization, etc., our human experience, and how that connects with nature, which is fundamentally not just simply apart from humanity. Okay, there's some question about that, but the idea that we exist within nature, but how do we exist within nature, right? And of course, in both of these authors, we see the romantic inclination to think that civilization, the development of the industrial world, if you will, has removed us from something very essential, which is nature. The second bullet point, how does Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Woman anticipate the suffrage movement of the late 19th and early 20th century, the second wave women's movement of the 1970s, and today's third wave women's movement? You may also wish to consider in what ways have the women's rights movements moved away from Wollstonecraft. So this is, again, I think this is a really interesting topic because it will allow you to engage not just simply in the past, but also the present. Okay. And from the perspective of how the women's rights movement sort of was spawned and generated both in the US and in the UK, as well as, its evolution, the changes that have happened over time. I mean, let's be honest, right? Wollstonecraft is 200 some years ago. Things are different, right? It would be facile to argue that they're the same exactly. Of course, they're not the exact same. So how have things changed, and how has Wollstonecraft been a part of that? and particularly her vindication. And how has it, in some ways, maybe been fulfilled? In some ways, has it been not fulfilled? In what ways have we seen the women's movement perhaps move away from Wollstonecraft? Right? I mean, there's a whole lot of things that you can talk about in this particular bullet point. The next bullet point: how is the figure of the Byronic hero influenced later, including contemporary, that means today, figures, both fictional and historical? Cite specific examples and how their lineage can be traced to Byron. So Lord Byron creates the Byronic hero, and of course you need to read Greenblatt's material about the Byronic hero, which is in our textbook in the lead-in, the prefatory material for Lord Byron. The Byronic hero as a character has been intensely influential in the 200 years since Byron first was writing. And we look at that character, we see it, well, in a variety of ways. I don't want to give too much stuff away here in the sense that I'd like you to do your own explorations. But the Byronic hero is kind of a loner, a figure of intense passion, feeling, who kind of ignores the rules of society, is not so much immoral as amoral, right? In the sense that these ordinary laws and rules and mores are feelings of thou shalt nots, just don't apply to the Byronic hero. Just, I think of kind of the prototypical rock star figure, for example. Jim Morrison of the Doors, out on the stage screaming, "I want the world and I want it now," which sounds kind of like a petulant 4-year-old in some ways, but also is kind of a figure of great attraction. Let's be frank about it. I mean, that's part of what the Byronic hero is, after all, is very attractive. And I don't mean in a physical sense. What I mean is in the sense of like, wow, would we like to be that kind of a figure? Dracula might be a Byronic hero of sorts, right? Certainly a Byronic figure of sorts, right? So you can see in a lot of course, Dracula goes back to Lord Byron, obviously. Well, I shouldn't say obviously. When we read about Polidori and the creation of the vampire story, in that great famous writing challenge that Byron put forward in Geneva back in, what was it, 1816? Not that long ago, right? No, 200 some odd years ago. And John Polidori created the figure of the vampire as an attractive, alluring bloodsucker, which Bram Stoker, of course, reinvented in Count Dracula. Anyway, real figures like, say, Jim Morrison or Napoleon, figures, pardon me, from literature, including Dracula, but many others. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that could be said about this, and it is truly a character type that we still have with us today. John Keats coined the term negative capability and ascribed it as a goal for writers, claiming that, for example, was a great achievement of Shakespeare's. Examine at least one of the odes of Keats and examine how Keats attempts to reach negative capability. You may wish to consider also whether this should, in fact, be a standard for greatness in a writer. Okay, and for that, of course, you'll have to go back and look at the letter that's in the syllabus to George, his brother, and Thomas, George and Thomas, his brothers, about negative capability. And there's a lot of writing about negative capability and what that means. And quite honestly, one of the things that you may want to consider with this, because what this does is it brings up the issue of the author and the author's presence in material, whether it's appropriate or inappropriate. In other words, material which is obviously biased or slanted or pushing us to love or hate a certain thing or figure, because this is the author's perspective, the author's point of view, right? And we see a lot of that, especially in our present time. Now, the paper is due to be submitted in Canvas by Friday, March the 4th. So you have quite a bit of time for this, but still, it will go fast. Be sure to follow the out-of-class essay guidelines for matters of form and style. Remember, those guidelines are available on Canvas. Go to the modules. I'll look them up. Okay, this is not just simply a bit of fluff here. I actually take these guidelines quite seriously, and I expect you to follow them. Failure to do that will obviously have an effect on grade. Use the correct MLA documentation as described in the MLA for Literature class handout or the current MLA handbook. So I have a literature class handout. Again, I expect you to use that and to follow it. Of course, the MLA handbook itself always kind of stands behind everything as the ultimate ruler or guide as to what we're doing there. Be sure to include a word count at the end of your essay. Okay, that's easy enough to find all the time nowadays. Remember, you must meet minimum requirements, including word count, sources, and subject matter. No late essays will be accepted without a verifiable medical or legal excuse. Things like my family took me on vacation, I had to work extra hours at work, I had a computer breakdown, are not acceptable excuses. So don't have them happen. Okay. Now, the minimum requirements, these are the things that need to be done. Okay, first of all, the paper should be at least 1,000 words to approximately 1,400. Now, a lot of my students find that this is not enough. They need more, and that's fine. If you do, go a little longer. That's why I put that little squiggly line here. It means kind of about. Now, some of my students in the past have gotten a little carried away. I've received, 6,000 word essays sometimes. That might be a little excessive. But above all, do not be late. Do not be short. Citations from at least 4 different sources. One of those sources must be the primary text. So in other words, Vindication, or the poem by Blake, or the poem by Wordsworth, or the Byronic poem that we have, Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, or in Keats's case, one of his poems. Now, 2 sources at least must be scholarly works, such as dissertations, peer-reviewed journal articles, or university press books. These can be found through our library, our Mesa College library. You do not have to go physically to the library. I'm not even sure they're even open for business. I know they're open for studying, but I'm not sure you can take stuff out. So you might as well just go online. The 4th source can be a source of your own choosing, whatever it might be, but it still must be a credible analytical source in its own right. So if it's a piece of junk, I'm not going to be impressed. Okay, you go online to find something, make sure what you find is good. If it's just some, unstated, anonymous, whack job saying something on their own personal website and you happen to pick it up on Google, hey, that's on you, man. The textbook itself here counts only as a primary source, even though, of course, you may always use editorial materials that Greenblatt and his colleagues have put together. Of course, you may have more than these 4 sources. I don't say you can only have 4 sources. You have to have at least 4 sources. And as already stated, MLA format, presentation, and documentation, including correct works cited. And we are now currently in the 9th edition of MLA, so be advised. Now, if you have any questions about this, please be sure to contact me. Either come to my office hours or send me a message, send me an email. But please do not be confused and fail to ask. It's always important that you ask. Looking forward to this. Should be a very fun assignment.